Imagine waking up tomorrow to a world where America is on its knees, not from war, not from internal collapse, but because a handful of countries decided, we're done helping you. Shocking? Unbelievable? Maybe. But it's also dangerously real. Today, we're diving into 12 countries the United States literally can't survive without, economically, politically, and strategically. You'll be surprised by some, enraged by others, and by the end, you'll question just how independent the US really is. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you love bold, controversial takes on global power, politics, and the untold stories the mainstream media won't cover. Hit that bell icon so you never miss an episode. Now let's begin. Let's start with the most obvious and the most awkward dependency, China. While Washington publicly bashes Beijing over human rights, military expansion, and trade wars, behind the scenes, America's economy is deeply entangled with China's. Over $500 billion in goods are traded annually. From iPhones to pharmaceuticals, even some US military equipment relies on Chinese components. And let's not forget rare earth elements. Those 17 obscure minerals crucial for building EV batteries, fighter jets, and even nuclear tech. Guess who dominates 85% of the world's processing capacity? That's right, China. Without China, the US would face economic paralysis within weeks. So, who's really in control? Do you think the US should cut ties with China? Comment yes or no below. America loves to preach democracy, but it has a peculiar habit of cozying up to oil monarchies like Saudi Arabia. Despite energy independence narratives, the truth is, the global oil market still controls US gas prices. And Saudi Arabia? It's the gatekeeper. The Saudis also play a critical geopolitical role, stabilizing the petrodollar, keeping Iran in check, and granting the US strategic military access in the Middle East. When Saudi Arabia shifts alliances, or reduces oil output, Wall Street shudders. One wrong move from Riyadh and the US could spiral into recession. Oh, and remember 9/11? Most of the attackers were Saudi nationals, yet we never cut ties. Ask yourself why. Should the US stop relying on oil nations like Saudi Arabia? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Mexico isn't just a neighbor, it's the U.S. quote, S manufacturing backbone, agricultural supplier, and border buffer. While political rhetoric paints Mexico as a problem, the reality is, millions of US jobs depend on Mexican labor and exports. America's agriculture? Heavily dependent on Mexican migrant workers. US cars? Assembled with Mexican-made parts. Even avocados, yes, your guacamole addiction, is sourced from south of the border. But the relationship is fragile. Rising cartel violence, migration issues, and nationalist politics in Mexico could rupture this vital dependency at any moment. What's one thing the US should do better in handling its relationship with Mexico? Let us know. When you think of tech powerhouses, you might picture Silicon Valley. But Germany, yeah, the land of precision engineering, is quietly essential to US industry. From industrial machines to biotech and automotive components, the US depends on Germany's manufacturing excellence. Not to mention Germany's role in stabilizing NATO and acting as a bridge between Europe and America in diplomacy and defense. If Germany pivoted eastward, or decided to pull away from US foreign policy agendas, America's influence in Europe would crumble overnight. Want to know what keeps America's tech dominance alive? Japan's innovation pipeline. From semiconductors to robotics, Japan powers industries ranging from defense to consumer electronics. Japan also holds over $1.1 trillion in US Treasury securities. In other words, Japan helps finance America's debt. The day Japan decides to dump US bonds or stops tech cooperation could be the day Wall Street crashes like a house of cards. India is no longer just a call center hub, it's a rising superpower with a population set to surpass China and an economy growing fast. The US needs India for multiple reasons: counterbalancing China, driving cheap software development, and serving as a key partner in the Indo-Pacific. But India isn't easy to control. It buys oil from Russia, has military ties with Iran, and doesn't always agree with US policies. If India ever decides to flip sides toward BRICS or full-blown nationalism, America could lose its most important Asian ally. Is India a reliable partner for the US? Type agree or disagree below. When you think of Brazil, you might picture carnival or soccer, But in reality, Brazil is a quiet giant in America's survival chain, especially when it comes to food, fuel, and the environment. First, Brazil is one of the world's largest exporters of soybeans, beef, sugar, and coffee. And guess who the biggest importer is? You guessed it, the United States. Second, Brazil holds a massive share of the global ethanol market, a critical component in America's renewable energy future. But here's the kicker. Brazil is also home to the Amazon rainforest, often called the lungs of the earth. If Brazil ever aligns with anti-Western blocs and limits environmental cooperation, America's climate agenda and food security could collapse like dominoes. You don't want to mess with Brazil. And yet most Americans couldn't even name the president. Should America invest more in Latin American partnerships? Share your take. Let's head north, to the largest undefended border in the world. Canada, often stereotyped as America's polite sibling, is actually a critical survival partner. Canada provides over 90% of the aluminum used in American construction and military vehicles. It's also a top supplier of oil, uranium, and clean water, resources the US desperately needs. And if that's not enough, Canada is America's #1 trading partner by volume. Their economies are so linked that a border shutdown would send shockwaves through both nations' financial systems. But recent tensions, over pipelines, tariffs, and even trucker protests, have strained this vital alliance. Could a fracture be on the horizon? If your phone, TV, or even your car has a screen, it likely came from South Korea. South Korea produces essential components like semiconductors, memory chips, and display tech that power everything from F-35 fighter jets to PlayStations. But here's where it gets even more serious. South Korea is a frontline ally against North Korea and China. The US relies on Seoul not just for electronics, but for military staging, intelligence sharing, and regional balance. If North Korea ever reignites the peninsula, or if South Korea shifts away from US influence, America's dominance in Asia would vanish overnight. Ah yes, the special relationship. But is it just PR? Or does the United States truly need the United Kingdom to survive? Despite Brexit and royal drama, the United Kingdom still offers America military intelligence, nuclear tech, and a critical foothold in European diplomacy. London and Washington are so close that their spy agencies, MI6 and the CIA, basically share databases. Financially, British investments keep American companies afloat, and vice versa. But tensions around surveillance, trade disputes, and shifting European Union dynamics make this alliance more fragile than it looks. Few alliances are as controversial as that of the United States and Israel. Critics say it's one-sided, supporters say it's essential. But what's the truth? Israel is America's eyes and ears in the Middle East, a surveillance powerhouse and military innovator. From drone tech to missile defense systems, Israel's inventions fuel the United States military-industrial complex. But there's more. United States evangelicals, lobbyists, and defense contractors have so deeply invested in Israel that cutting ties could trigger political chaos at home. Yet global outrage over Gaza and shifting Middle East alliances may one day force a reevaluation. What happens then? Should the United States continue giving billions in aid to Israel? Comment yes or no. Last but not least, the tiny island that holds the entire United States tech economy hostage, Taiwan. Taiwan produces over 60% of the world's semiconductors and nearly 90% of the advanced chips powering everything from iPhones to missile guidance systems. If China invades and they're planning for it, the global chip supply vanishes. America's economy halts. The United States knows this. That's why it keeps warships in the Taiwan Strait, funds Taiwanese defense, and builds chip factories at home. But make no mistake, losing Taiwan would be an extinction-level event for American tech dominance. So there you have it, 12 countries that the United States can't afford to lose. From global superpowers to strategic islands, from friendly neighbors to controversial allies, these nations hold the keys to America's survival. But with rising nationalism, shifting alliances, and the constant threat of war or economic disruption, how long can the United States hold on to these lifelines? Could America one day wake up alone? Let us know which of these countries you think is most critical to America's future, and which ones could walk away tomorrow. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss the next one.